think for demolition, I think there's a really strong case for getting humans out of the loop. Yeah, I think the ethical implications of roboticization of construction is a major challenge that needs to be addressed.
The demolition and construction industry is developing at a faster pace than ever before. New equipment, new technology, and new forms of fuel are revolutionising the sector and changing the very landscape of the industry. We have created an entirely new audio and video podcast series to chart that progress and to help keep you abreast of these rapid and revolutionary changes. This is Tech Foresights.
Depending on your viewpoint, robots are the key to man's freedom from labour or a mass unemployment event just waiting to happen. The inevitable next step in human development or the first step towards a dystopian future. Regardless of your viewpoint, there can be little doubt that the robots are coming, and one of the key areas they're targeting is demolition and construction. I caught up with Sam Wood at Navtech Radar to discuss the potential for robots in the construction sector, and I started by asking him about what he describes as the 4 Ds of robotisation.
When we think about tasks that could be completed by robots, they're a good measure on whether they're appropriate to be completed by robots. So the 4 Ds are dirty, dangerous, dull, and dear. So if we think about tasks that that meet some of these kind of requirements, then they are good to automate or good to apply robotics to. So these tasks are often very repetitive and maybe high risk, which is the dangerous part, or they could cost a lot, and therefore robots can perform these tasks more efficiently and safely than the humans. And to be honest, in the next 30 years, there will be a higher requirement for the construction industry as there are growing demands for safer and more efficient construction projects. So some of these kind of applications could be things like demolition, excavation, very heavy lifting, that may require more advanced robotics in the years to come. And these 4 Ds are just a way of describing tasks that robotics can be applied to.
It's interesting you should mention there's 2 things I'll pick up on that. The first is dirty, dangerous, dull, and dear. That pretty much sums up virtually every aspect of the construction industry. But we're speaking on the same day that the Construction Industry Training Board has announced that we're going to need about another 50,000 workers. We're talking human workers at the moment, per year for the next 4 years. Do robots slot into that, do you believe?
I think it's a good point. I mean, we don't want to just replace humans with robots. We want to open up tasks that were previously not able to be completed by robots, or new ways of or new methods. So a good example of that would be 3D printing houses with kind of more advanced materials, or inspecting damaged tunnels or buildings where currently we would consider that too dangerous for a human to do. So therefore it doesn't, it's not something we would kind of complete. So I mean, when we're thinking about kind of where can robotics open up new jobs, and that's the exciting thing for me, not just cost saving and taking humans out of the loop. It's about doing things that humans can't do currently, and actually opening up new job opportunities. So I mean, a really good example of that is the drone industry, where the advent of drones and the ability to inspect things that were previously uninspectable has opened up new jobs and then for surveyors and for our analysts. So it can have a really positive impact on human jobs. But there are certainly tasks which I believe are better suited for robots.
You mentioned that, so let's pick up on a bit of that. What roles do you believe are best suited to robotisation? And I guess obviously safety is going to be one, but what benefits do you think we can expect to enjoy when robotisation actually takes hold?
So really, it's about at the moment, from my perspective, it's around repetitive, physically demanding or dangerous tasks that currently humans are having to partake in. So by automating these tasks or taking the human out of the loop on that, or maybe rather than taking the human out of the loop entirely, having the loop monitor a system that is actually completing the task, we can improve maybe the efficiency of the task, but more importantly, the safety of the task, and actually reducing the the likelihood that that person is going to not come home after a day's work, which is critical, really. And so we've seen that, I mean, in other sectors, so things like the mining industry, where we've taken people out of deep mines where it was dangerous. We now have them working on the surface, and they are healthier and they are able to still do a job and do a job quicker and more efficiently than they were previously able to do. So it's all about improving safety, is a key thing, and then the efficiency gains are also enabling us to do more.
Obviously, robots exist. They exist on factory floors and that kind of thing. So, bearing in mind that they do exist, what has prevented construction from adopting robotisation up until this point? And I guess what is the stumbling blocks that are preventing us making your vision a reality, I guess?
I mean, some of the things that that we can highlight very quickly are things like high cost. So robotic systems and equipment can be quite expensive to purchase and maintain, so that can make them kind of cost prohibitive for certain construction companies. And on top of that is that some lack of skilled personnel. So there's a shortage of skilled workers who are actually trained and able to maintain these robotic systems, which can make it quite difficult for adopting the technologies for the companies. And there are other parts that I think are really important and really coming to the fore in construction, but also in things like mining, agriculture, and logistics. And this is around the safety concerns. So construction sites can be dangerous environments. It isn't practical to have robot-only construction sites, so humans and robots are going to have to work in tandem together. And so how do we make sure that we can deploy robotic systems that are safe to be used in and around humans? And then I guess the other thing is limited scope for application. So robotic systems are currently used primarily as certain types of construction, such as bridge and tunnel construction, but they might not be practical for all other projects, such as kind of inner city residential building. It might at this point in time, they might not be fiscally or kind of practically appropriate to be using. And then one of the things we've really picked up on from the mining industry, and this has been a big focus for the mining industry for the last couple of years, is around limited interoperability. So different robotic systems are unable to communicate with another. It makes it difficult for companies to integrate them with their existing operations. So it's all about making sure that the systems we bring in can seamlessly work with the systems we already have, so that we don't have to have massive upheaval each time we adopt new technologies.
I was speaking to a Chinese manufacturer called XCMG just a few weeks ago over at the Bauma exhibition, actually. And they were talking about autonomous operation of equipment, which apparently in China you can virtually do it anywhere you damn well please. And apparently here in Europe we have different regulations. Is that something that needs to be overcome, or are we so far ahead of ourselves now that we don't actually require the regulation, and that will come? If you were to build a robot that was capable of demolishing a building tomorrow afternoon, would you be allowed to do so?
Would you be allowed to do so? So I think it's a really, really good point. I think we benefit from regulation, and actually I think the question of whether we apply robotics to every construction task is complex and probably needs to be balanced with benefits and drawbacks. I do know that kind of factors such as cost, safety, and the impact on human employment do need to be taken into account. So over the next couple of years, there is going to need to be really, really careful planning and collaboration between different stakeholders, from the construction companies to government agencies, to really understand how do we adopt robotics in an ethically and responsible way, and that would benefit human beings ultimately. So it's not I can't give a binary answer. I'd say it's complex, but these are things that we need to, collaboration is going to be key to that.
We'll come back to the question of ethics in just a second, but in a very recent episode of the very show that you're on at the moment, I was speaking to JCB about their electric construction equipment, and one of their team said, we have the power, let me say that again, we have proved that we can electrify just about anything. The question is not can we, the question is should we? That same notion kind of applies to robotising construction and demolition tasks, I guess.
Yeah, I think it does. I completely agree with JCB on that. I think the automating tasks and what level we automate them to, that's probably the differentiator for me in terms of how we look at robotics. So there are tasks that are better suited to automation. So very repetitive tasks such as road laying, I can see a good case for making that quite high levels of automation. I think for demolition, I think there is a really strong case for getting humans out the loop, so that they can tele-remote these pieces of equipment to improve the safety. I think it depends how technology can be applied and balancing these things across cost to the benefits, whether full autonomy it would be beneficial to a demolition site. But certainly we're seeing in quite a lot of industries the tele-remote or human assist is a really, really sensible next step in the immediate kind of next to 2 to 3 years for the construction industry.
Well, yeah, when I think of robots, probably exposed to too many Hollywood movies, I guess, I tend to think of sort of Android, C-3PO, iRobot type things. With that's not necessarily the case. When I've seen actual robots applied to construction, bricklaying robots and road repair robots, they look more like they belong on a factory production line rather than in a Hollywood movie. Do we need to rethink our perception of robots, how they look and how they're going to be part of the workforce?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. I think designing a robot to take a humanoid appearance and then getting that robot to drive the human-designed vehicle is pretty inefficient. You'd be almost better off redesigning the vehicle entirely. I do think, and we know this already from the advances in automation already taking place in the mining industry, is that the retrofitting opportunity is huge. So a lot of companies have large fleets of vehicles already. They don't want to remove all of them at massive capital expense. So if we can retrofit on top of the current vehicles, then that is probably a really good next step. Next generation of construction vehicles, where there is no question that they will be without a human, then cabless designs we'll start to see. I think for large civil engineering, I don't think it's going to be a humanoid appearance is likely to be the one that we'll see. But I do think you make it's an interesting point, because if we look at things like tasks which have to take place in very confined, tight spaces, or I mean, a classic example is with the Daleks from Doctor Who not being able to go upstairs. We do see things like the Boston Spot robotic dogs being used to use human infrastructure such as stairs, such as doors. Unless we completely change the way these buildings are created, then we might be in a situation where actually having humanoid robots isn't that unsensible if you need them to use the infrastructure that's already there designed for humans.
You mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to go back to it. During the recent Bower exhibition, there was a lot of talk about remote control and autonomous machines. And for the first time ever, and I've been doing this for a long while, for the first time ever, I heard equipment manufacturers mentioning the word ethics, as they're aware, obviously, of the potential impact that on human employment, by robotisation and automation and that kind of thing. That's still a challenge that needs to be overcome, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ethical implications of roboticization of construction is a major challenge that needs to be addressed. I don't think it's binary. I do think it needs really close consideration. So I'd say if we took an example of how robotics could remove jobs from the construction industry, would be bricklaying. So in this case, the robot is able to lay bricks faster and more accurately than a human worker, which could lead to fewer bricklayers. But then if we look on the other hand, so an example of how robotics can increase jobs in the construction industry, we could look at drones for surveying and mapping. The use of drones will reduce the amount of time and resources needed for surveying and actually allow for more accurate data collection. This could lead to an increase in skilled drone operators, but also data analysts and analysts required for interpolation as well as planners. And ultimately, this is reducing the risk of injury for the workers on site. So both of those points, increasing jobs and actually making the jobs that we have already safer, are really positive ways that robots can be applied. I mean, some of the strategies I think we need to be considering are things like training and education. So how can we provide better training and opportunities for the workers to adapt to an evolving working environment with robotics? I think collaboration between workers and engineers and how we design the implementation of robotics and technology is really important, and then investing in research and development and that how we can lead to more advanced robotic technologies, which increases workers with those specialized skills. And then finally, I think an interesting idea would be in the encouragement of automation, human collaboration. So instead of replacing human workers with robots entirely, how can we put standards in place that companies can use robots to assist human workers, which will ultimately lead to better productivity, which the companies will love, but also job satisfaction and healthier and safer lives.
There was a couple of interesting examples you gave there. The idea of being less bricklayers, so impacting sort of the blue collar end of the market, and more drone surveyors and estimators, so increasing on the white collar. It does feel like these robots that you're talking about, these are the slaves and the drones of the future, by the sound of things.
It could be. I mean, it's about getting robots to do tasks that I think humans, we don't want human brains and human souls to be doing. It's about getting them to do things that we would consider too dangerous, and ultimately that's going to lead to better quality of life for more people around the world.
It's now more than 5 years since Balfour Beatty published a white paper that predicted that construction sites would be human-free zones by 2050. Is that a realistic prospect?
I think that prediction is that it's largely human-free as possible, but it's going to depend on the rate of progress with the technology and the ability to overcome a couple of challenges that are holding things back. But I think with some of the advances that we're seeing, particularly in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and kind of increased levels of kind of IoT devices throughout industry, these are the things that are going to kind of get us to a quicker adoption of technology. I think there are some kind of the way the construction industry will have to consider changes in needs for the workforce, such as an aging population, and how do we meet those needs with technology. They have to be considered. I think one of the things that which will be really interesting for the construction industry is in this interoperability. So it's the ability for different systems or devices or software programs to work together. So I'd say in the context of robotics, it's all around how, if you took different robotic systems such as a drone, excavator, and crane, how could they communicate with each other and share information in a more efficient way? So an example of this in the mining industry is the use of autonomous drilling systems, which through a combination of sensors, cameras, and GPS, navigate the mine and drill holes in the correct locations. But also in the mining industry, when an excavator loads trucks, an autonomous truck that then transports the material back to the processing plant, and this is done via the use of GPS, and the data collected while working can actually improve the performance of other systems. So one of the examples of interoperability in the construction industry could be the use of building information modeling and robotic technology. So the BIM can be used to create a digital twin of the construction site, and then this could be used to simulate and plan construction processes and optimize the construction process. So by using robotic and the BIM together, you could achieve kind of greater precision and efficiency in construction sites, and ultimately that's going to lead to faster completion times, lower costs, and hopefully improved safety where you are replacing human workers in dangerous areas of the site.
You've mentioned mining a couple of times. I guess one of the advantages that mining has is in most cases, particularly where you've got autonomous trucks operating in sort of Australia and America and parts of Africa, is the fact that those mines tend to be miles from anywhere. There's not many people around. They're very remote. Is that still... Is that actually a drawback, or is that a perceived drawback of unleashing a robot on an unsuspecting public in the middle of a city centre?
No, I think you're bang on the money. I think the remoteness is a real advantage for those sites. So we have deployments of our radar technology in Australia, and one of the things they can do really easily to deploy safe robotics is they can geofence the location and say, actually, if we put an interlock system around this whole site, there will be no humans in the site, therefore we don't need to meet certain levels of functional safety integrity. So having the ability to just geofence a location is maybe possible in a remote location or an industrial site, but in a city building site would probably be quite difficult. So I think how robots need to work in construction sites, particularly in these inner city developments, there will be much more scrutiny over the integrity of how safe those systems are and how resilient they are to things like cyber cybercrimes. I think the where we might see, I mean, we've kind of mentioned it before, but these civil engineering construction sites, such as kind of tunnels or bridges, are probably better suited at this point to robotics, just because of the scale of them, which means that any kind of small increases in efficiency or safety are magnified through the site. But also, you do have the option to maybe geofence parts of the system so that you don't need humans and robots working in such close proximity.
Construction is a bit of a weird industry in that we are very keen on innovation, and yet we are also resistant to change. Obviously, we have a deadline for the abolition of diesel on demolition and construction sites in the not too distant future, and yet despite the fact that we need an alternative, there does seem to be a real reluctance to switch to electric or possibly hydrogen down the line. Bearing in mind that this is what you do for a living, what do you see from construction companies? Are they welcoming you with open arms, or are they treating you like the devil himself?
I think I mean, generally people are pretty accepting of the idea that automation can lead to better operations. I mean, so I'd say typically we in terms of where we're working, I think the construction industry typically, from what we're seeing, lags other industries in terms of the adoption of automation. I think we've kind of highlighted some of those challenges, but there is an acceptance that as long as we are improving worker safety and making building operations more efficient, then there is an accepting that this is a good thing. I think from our side, as a radar company, with our ability to operate any kind of day and in very adverse weather conditions, which typically a human may not want to work in, this is opening up opportunities that I think the construction companies can see. I'd say the other aspect is we do quite a lot of work with universities, and universities are a real kind of hotspot for where this innovation is going on, and they are very, very keen to work with kind of high-end sensors like the ones we manufacture and design. So those relationships with universities, with industry, but also our engagement with government agencies is going to be really important as we look to hopefully shape the way construction adopts our technology.
Sam, that's been absolutely fascinating. Where can people find out more about Navtech Radar, the company that pays for wages?
Yeah, so you can find out more about Navtech Radar on our website, so just at navtechradar.com, and we have data sheets, but we also have data sets that we have available for people if they want to see our radar technology in comparable locations, and we've got application engineers and support engineers to help with the adoption of our technology, that be through trials or through pilot projects, and hopefully we go to commercial deployment later down those timelines.
Final question. How long before we see a robot on a UK construction site?
So I think we're probably about 7 years away from kind of beyond what you'd call a pilot, that's something where we are seeing an actual commercial deployment of robotics. I think we're kind of 5 to 7 years away. But there are pilots going on now, and I think in the next kind of, let's say 2 to 3 years, I would say watch this space for Navtech, because we have some things coming in in the UK. So it's very exciting. But I'd say that's probably the time frame we're talking about.
When that happens, you'll be welcome back anytime. Sam, you've been an absolute star. Thanks so much for your time today, and look forward to seeing the developments in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you for watching or listening to Tech Foresights. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please be sure to share this with a friend or a colleague, and don't forget to leave us a like, comment or a review. We really appreciate it. And please be sure to check back soon for another episode. Or better still, hit the subscribe button to be notified when each new episode drops.